best practices and show some demos. About me, I'm basically a Python developer, but I take care of writing JavaScript. I've written a couple of MVC apps, client-side MVC apps, and I contribute to tech articles on online magazines as well. About you, I assume you understand JavaScript, you understand what an MVC pattern or MV star pattern is, and you want to test your code, because I'm not going to do a sales pitch for testing. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about namespaces, because the way JavaScript handles namespaces are kind of cluttered. We're going to talk about modularity in your application, and we'll be talking about asynchronous module definition, dynamic dependency management, and we'll see a modular backbone application. We'll be talking a lot about unit testing, and we'll have a demo with QUnit, and then we'll have a talk about patterns in testing clients and everything. And by these patterns, I mean practical patterns, not the design patterns, because practical patterns are low level and granular, whereas design patterns are pretty high level and require much more of time. This talk by no means is going to be a deep dive session, because 30 minutes is too less a time for a deep dive session. By a deep dive session, I mean I won't be talking about how you can writing a mixins and how you will be going about nested views in a backbone application. This talk is not going to be about that. We'll have overview of most of the stuff that I talked about. So this was kind of me, like come from a Python community where the snake is already tamed and the best practices are already in place. Namespaces are a good thing in Python, imports are in place, you don't have to worry about dynamic dependency management and other stuff, and it's really cool working over there. But then when you come to JavaScript, right, when you are a backend developer, and then you have to come to writing front-end code as well, in case if you have to see ship a total app out. So a couple of things that you hate are namespaces. There are so many global variables, and then in case if you have some kind of ADD or OCD, life becomes really tough for you. And then there are lack of maintainability, and there are lack of patterns. And I'm going to talk about this as well. So namespaces, JavaScript does not have a built-in support for them, but you can use closures to achieve the similar effect, and which leads to the prevention of pollution of global scope. There are a couple of ways you can modify your namespaces. One of them is prefix namespacing for your global variables. But the problem with global variables is like if you use too many global variables, they become hard to maintain, and with the size of your project, things start getting cluttered and you lose maintainability in your project. So wisdom lies in avoiding the conflict. For a simple backbone application, what you kind of do is for a view, list view, in case you have a list view, in case you have a detailed view, you can add a prefix, say my application underscore list view, my application underscore detailed view, and you can go on doing this, and this will kind of sort your global variable things. The other way of managing namespaces is kind of object literals. Object literals help you in assisting in organizing your code and parameters logically. So in case if you see over here, my app will be defined if there is already, it won't be defined in case it already has a definition, but in case it is not defined, it's a simple thing, it's a simple concept at heart, but it kind of works wonders and magic. Then you have the style of Yahoo user interface. They kind of use nested DOM. When you see nested DOM, probably the first thing that strikes you is it kind of speedy. But and then Document Cloud as well, the creator of Backbone, they even use the nested views, nested namespacing, and there is not much of speed concern in it. And what it helps you in doing is like similar parents can't have different parents can't have like children, right? So that way it kind of prevents you from spoiling your namespaces. So when you talk about modularity, you talk about a couple of things. You mean a couple of things with them. When you talk about modularity, it means things are highly decoupled. They are at places segregated. They are distinct, and that enforces maintainability and dependency minimization. So if you kind of remove one thing, it doesn't affect the other part of the system. So that's what modularity means. And when you think about modularity for a backbone app, you kind of think of how do I declare and invoke my stuff, how do I organize my code, how do I organize my project structure. So an easy way of doing this is this is a kind of sample organized. I would call this a modular project. You have your models defined in a separate folder. You have your routers defined in a separate folder. You have your views in separate folder, and you can make use of object literal patterns that so you can make use of these. Is it clear? Everybody can see the fonts, or should I need to include? So you can do the same in your models as well. So in case the app variable is not defined, it will be defined, and if it is not defined, this is one cool way of going by maintaining your namespaces. So this was kind of an intro to how you organize your project structure of a backbone app. So then when you have organized taken care of your namespaces and then organize your code, you don't have script src is equal to star.js, alpha.js, beta.js. There are so many JS that you want to put in place. So require.js helps you do that dynamically. You have asynchronous module loading. I mean, you kind of load only things that you want to load, and I have a simple demo of it. I'll show you. So the way you do it, first thing is you have a main file, and then you load the require.js file. So you have this main.js that will this main.js will take care of other stuff. I mean, it's kind of like the main file where all the imports are mentioned. Then require.js is what helps you, the library. And in case if I have a simple calculator function, it has two files, multiply.js and square.js. Multiply.js does nothing, it takes two variables and returns the product of those two. And square.js has a dependency on multiply.js, and the way you do is you first define the dependency. It's an array. First you take an array and then pass that variable from that array into the function, an anonymous function, and that function will take care of loading the things for you. So in case if you see, I want to square 5, so I require the math/square file, square module, and I pass this function square, and I just display the square of 5. I can change it to say 6, and hopefully probably it's because of cookies that I'm getting the same numbers, but it actually works. So couple of things to take note over here is in your index file, you don't need to mention all those script src includes, and that is being taken care of by require.js via this one main.js file that tells you what to load and when to load. So this is a basic of asynchronous module definition with require.js. With this we come to testing. This being my favorite topic. I mean, the only not so good thing about testing is writing them. Like, you can talk a lot about testing, you can think a lot about testing, but why don't we want to write tests? Because writing tests takes a lot of time. Running tests is kind of time consuming, and it kind of becomes hard for you at times. And then based upon the needs, there are no specific patterns as to how you should test your code, because your project requirements might be dynamic, and then what works in single project might not work in a different project at all. So it's kind of one hand approach on a project. So there's nothing kind of predefined structure that you will have to follow, but obviously there are patterns which I'm going to talk about. So when you see testing, this kind of shows you an overview of testing in a software industry. On an axis you have duct tape programmers. An example of a duct tape programmer is Jamie Javinsky, the man who termed Mozilla, the man who was a lead developer at Netscape. These guys don't believe in testing. They want to release and ship their software taking into consideration edge cases of themselves. Then on the other hand, there are test fanatics who want each bit of their code tested with 100% code coverage. These are the two kind of extremes, and there is everyone in between who wants to test sometimes and who does not want to test sometimes. When testing, there are a couple of other things as well. You have unit test, and then you have your integration test. With unit test are granular. They kind of address one specific feature or a unit. By one specific feature meaning it's almost kind of cause and effect relation. If I do X, Y happens. If I click a non-existent URL, I get a 404. If I click an existent URL, I get a 200. So unit tests are small scale tests that address a specific concern, whereas integration tests are kind of tests that take your system as a whole and they make sure that no features break anywhere and all your regressions pass. Again, with testing, I mean, there are so many terms: acceptance test, programmers test, behavior test, mock test, stub test, and there is alpha test, beta. I mean, there are so many things about it. There are so many terms, and based upon each of the terms, there are so many definitions, and based upon each of the definitions, there are so many opinions and design patterns. So people belonging to one design pattern feel the other are wrong, and vice versa. So it's a kind of debatable topic, and we should not take it over here. And the thing about integration test is, test your external dependencies. They are slow when compared to unit tests. Your unit tests are fast and they are in memory. The third thing is, with the size of the third dimension is, with the size of your project, when the scalability grows, maintaining your test suites is kind of tougher, and it kind of becomes more painful, and you have to take extra care of say using extra test runners and managing your SQLite database, your in-memory databases and stuff. So this kind of summarizes the pains and overview of testing in a general software environment. And having looked at this, let's move further. So when I talk about unit tests, I mean, you test so many things. You write unit tests, you write integration tests, and do other mock tests and other stuff as well. So why can't we have a exhaustive testing that can test everything? Why do I need to write only unit test, and why do I need to write integration test? Just write one test and make sure things are fine. It boils down to this simple logic. Say you have a code of scale n. It will have a unit test of scale n, meaning if you have an exception, either you'll write test for it, either the exception will pass or the exception will fail. So code with scale of n will have a unit test of scale probably k into n, where n is very smaller than k. But whereas for exhaustive correctness, you want to traverse the entire tree, you want to traverse take each of the paths. For an example, backbone.js has 1477 lines of code, and I did a grep, and it had 201 ifs. Now when you take care of all those ifs from the basic laws of combinatorics, when there is an if, either it will happen or it won't happen. So for a given if, you have two cases, right? So when you take a look at it, the number of test cases for this the backbone.js library, I mean, and you know it comes tested, right? So if they went for doing exhaustive testing for that, the number of test cases would have been 2 raised to 201, and it boils down to this big number. It's kind of 60-digit number. Probably you can look Wolfram Alpha for making more sense of this number. So, I mean, writing these many tests is kind of impossible, and that's why we don't go for exhaustive correctness, but we test the basic correctness via the unit test. Now, when we have seen that we need to write unit tests, let's talk about what should be tested and when should be tested. Generally, the rule of thumb is like you should take for granted that whatever is inbuilt in the library comes pre-tested, and you don't need to write tests. And the other thing is like you should not be so deep into the testing that you are kind of writing test for test and doing meta testing. So these are the two things that you need to take care of. Don't test the standard library and don't write tests for your tests. Now, when you talk about JavaScript, QUnit, there are a couple of things, but QUnit is the kind of thing, it's pretty easy and handy to get started with. All you need to do is include the QUnit CSS, you include the QUnit JS, put a div of QUnit and put your test file. A simple test case would look like this. I have a simple palindrome function that checks if a number is palindrome or not. If the reverse of the string is a string, return true, otherwise return false. So when we talk about testing, and we talk about modularity in testing as well. So you can define test modules in your test via module 1, module 2, or you can give more sensible names than these. And you pass your function, and then you say how many assert statements will be taken. In this case, I have 2 assert statements. Assert basically means it tells you whatever your condition is it justified or not. I mean, if you want a true variable, it's coming true or not. So, so in case I have over here, I have 2 assert statements. So I just give an expect of 2, and this works sampled. Yeah. Sample test would look like this. This setup and tear down method will be called for each of the tests, and they kind of help you to manage your test fixtures in case if you have any. Time does not permit me to talk about coverage in testing, but you can probably take a look at coverage. I mean, that ensures you are confident. I mean, how confident you are about your test cases. Let me show you a simple demo of testing as well. So, as I had already mentioned, you have this CSS file over here, you have this div ID with main, div ID with QUnit, and then these 2 QUnit files and the test files. Then it's the same thing, same function. If you are testing a palindrome, it returns a true if it is a palindrome and returns a false if it is not a palindrome. I search for this word magnum. If it's a palindrome, I expect yes, it's a palindrome, and the word is not a palindrome, so I say not equal is palindrome true. So it means test a false palindrome. Let's run this test and see what happens. I have a local server running at 8080 for this particular thing. So it shows me a couple of things. First, the hello test over here passes, and then I have the other module 1 thing. It kind of test a true palindrome and test a false palindrome. So test a true palindrome and test a false palindrome. They both pass as well. So this is a kind of very basic demo of testing with QUnit. Okay, now we come to testing backbone models. When you test for backbone models, models are basically your data house kind of stuff. So you want to make sure, I mean, when you unit test, again, it's kind of the same philosophy. You test the basic correctness. So you basically want to see if the new instances can be created with the expected default values, if the attributes which you want to set have been saved, and in case if there is a change in an attribute, it kind of reflects in the DOM. And in case if you have any validation, the validation stands justified. When you talk of collections, collections are basically your model managers, and so you basically, when you test your collections, you basically want to ensure that your model is being managed properly. In case if you have changed any stuff, it reflects in the DOM. In case you have any URL changes, again it shows there. Views are basically when you play with your DOM and the interaction with it. So I mean, when you test your views, you should test if they are being correctly tied to a DOM element and created, and they support wiring up view methods. So that's most about it. So what do we take away from here? These are kind of taken from the Zen of Python and applies to almost everywhere from here. Applies to almost all software development fields. Namespaces are a great honking idea. Like, you should need to manage your namespaces. You should take care of not polluting them and avoiding conflicts. There should be kind of one and preferable only one and obvious way to do it. You should follow patterns and try to replicate those patterns, because patterns are something which comes from experience, and we should utilize the experience of the people who have delivered them. Explicit is better than implicit, so in case if you have different folders, explicitly mentioning what you should, where you should place what files, that helps you in better understanding of the project and helps you in a better organized project structure. Better start testing. I mean, now is always better than never. Having said all that, the requirements of a project kind of varies. It's not sure every time. At the end of the day, what matters is if you have, whether or not you have shipped the code. So in case if you have not resources, ample resources, probably it's up to you to decide. I have a simple cool app I wanted to demo. I built it yesterday night. So it's Hackbook Pro, kind of where you go on pasting your rants, what you have learned, what you have, in case if you have written some cool snippets and stuff. Currently I am the only one user. I would like few of you to come over here and sign up and let me know your feedbacks. I'd appreciate that. Slides are here in case if you have any questions. You can probably run.
Thanks for the talk.
Yeah.
You mentioned the asynchronous module loading.
Yeah.
In what sense is the asynchronous meant?
In case, say, yeah. So, in case, if, say, for one part of my project I require jQuery, for the other part, I mean, it's kind of a hypothetical answer. In case for say, I want jQuery, and for the other I want, say, Mozo. So, I want, in a particular, say, models, I want to load only jQuery, and the other only want to load Mozo. So, that will help me to load Mozo when required and jQuery when required. Asynchronous.
I see. So, they are not based on the timing in asynchronous.
This is that pattern. I mean, this is actually the name coined by them, so I don't want to change the name. I mean, this has an authoritative preference.
Okay. And so I remember that in that the main.js,
yeah,
when you included that array with first arg as that file. Yeah. So let's say if my my cube was dependent on the square. If my cube JS.
Yeah.
So I would include square comma cube, right?
So this is an array. What you would do is
I'll just add an element, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So this require is used for only loading JavaScript dependencies or any other dependencies on your module like CSS, templates?
I haven't used for anything else, but it can be used.
Okay.
Yeah.
And should it be a good practice to
Yes.
download every dependency using require?
Probably yes. In case if you have a large scale project, it helps.
Okay, so QUnit or Jasmine kind of frameworks allows me to test a module as a whole, right?
No, QUnit and Jasmine are different things. QUnit kind of is a unit testing thing, PAD thing, test, and Jasmine is kind of behavior driven thing. I mean, on a higher level, the behavior driven and test driven, behavior driven and test driven are same, but on a granular level, they kind of are different.
Right, so, but I can perform unit testing using QUnit. Right?
Yes, you can.
So that will allow me to test a module as a whole.
No, that allows unit testing allows you to test a unit, and depending upon how you define a unit, basically unit is kind of a feature. And I'm not sure what you mean by module.
So let's consider that palindrome example.
Yeah.
In that case, I've used string.reverse as a utility method, right?
Yes.
Now consider that reverse method is not already available in the browser. I will define my own.
That's what I mentioned in one of the slides. You should assume the standard things are present and should not test them.
So let's consider, this is just an example.
Yeah, sure.
So let's consider that palindrome is a module. And
Palindrome
inside
is a-
that module, that palindrome checking is a module.
Yeah, okay.
And inside that, I have defined a nested function
Okay.
for reverse.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's say I want to test that reverse method.
Yeah.
Is that possible using QUnit?
Yeah.
Because that will be a local variable to that complete module.
So in that case, you have to check the scope and then test. But you can. Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys.